through your freedom.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
Well, hello, world. You bet, man. We're getting closer to it. Now, of course, this is just satire. This is just humorous discussion, maybe some cynicism thrown in there. And we don't recommend violence, incite it, encourage it, glorify it, glamorize it, nor do we try and recommend anything harmful or dangerous or anything like that. We're just going to have a little talk, a satirical, philosophical discussion about what's happening. Folks, this is horrifying to consider. In Canada, a majority of Parliament has sided with Justin Trudeau. They've sided with his tyranny that he's unleashed. They voted to uphold the unprecedented, unneeded, if you look at the language, Emergencies Act. And this is even being upheld after protesters were beaten, shackled, abused, and trampled by horses. So never mind who owns and controls Parliament. Klaus Schwab, World Economic Forum, bragging about it. Yep, it looks like he was right. He controls it, folks. Now, I'm going to ask some questions. We have some things to think about. Don't you find it strange that a government can find a person's bank account and freeze it, seize it, just days after the government feels threatened by patriots who are peacefully parked and demanding their rights? Isn't it interesting how quickly they can find stuff and act? But, a government, when it sees something like Antifa violently attacking, murdering, looting, government not only fails to freeze their bank accounts or find who they are, it fails to arrest and prosecute, and then further shows its pure intention to commit treason against the people by supporting and encouraging further lawlessness and violence by groups like that, BLM. It's funny how government can act against the people and government can use violence against the people. In both cases, we see where government stands. So I ask this question: what are people to do? Well, they're faced with a decision, folks. Canadian Parliament was faced with a decision, and they sided with tyranny. They sided with a little, effeminate man. Who is exceedingly weak, but a guy who assaults a female parliamentarian, right? So, can a law-abiding, non-violent people like the Canadians, can they convince a violent institution? Well, a demonstrably violent institution, if you look at what they just did, can they convince a violent government to surrender its violence and again choose peace and public servitude? That is, can they convince the government peacefully to resume its place as servant of the people, not its master? Or does a violent, hate-filled government, and I think hate is appropriate, it hates its people, it's stolen from its people, and it is now abusing its people. Does a violent, hate-filled government, one that despises the founding principles of freedom, continue its despotic methods to attain total power? Right? It's not voluntarily letting up on the people. Instead, it's choosing more violence. Right? So if one concludes that a government has become the enemy of its own people, if it becomes an institution that ignores the law and proclaims itself above the law, the creator of law, what choices do the people now have? Again, when the law of the land is, say, the U.S. Constitution or the charters, which proclaim the people have rights, And the sitting government and its tyrant, its would-be king, says it's above that law, and it creates its own laws that supersede and take away the old laws. That's an interesting thing, is it not? It proclaims itself above the law, the creator of new law. What choice do the people have? Right? The first choice, I guess, would be to continue being peaceful. Submit to the nouveau deity, Trudeau, and place their head in a noose, for they are now dead. Their rights are dead. Their rights are placed in a noose or placed in a sarcophagus and buried, right? So that's a choice. And a slave's soul will operate their bodies as the servants of this new law and pay homage and worship the law of man. Because it's not the law of the people, it's the law of man now. Whoever that man is, in this case, Trudeau, who himself is acting as servant to his greater masters. But that's one choice. Surrender yourself, surrender your body, surrender your rights, and be peaceful. The second choice is to accept that you tried to be peacefully reasonable. You tried to be peaceably intelligent with a wayward servant, demonstrably wayward. The servant has gained the power of administration. That's what it was charged with. But then it also claimed the power to rule with complete disregard to reason, because of an emergency. Cerveza bug. Right? Now, once it's understood to be irreconcilable with the law of the land or conscientious thought and reason, one must oppose this new tyrannical entity with all manner of force, removing first its protective agents, and then its regent or its upstart king. For the act of treason, death has, in history past, been the compensation that tyrants deserve. It universally removes the blight, right? And this serves as a moral lesson to other would-be liars. And sometimes this lesson lasts for centuries. But ultimately, it always fails. And ultimately, there's always a tyrant that steps in and proclaims itself to be above the law, above the people, master of the people, and uses all manner of force and public office to destroy its own public, to subdue its public, right? So I ask this question, what will it be, Canada? Are you lovers of life, even as slaves and peasants? Or do you demand that your liberty be set free and take the necessary and, dare we say, violent actions to restore law and order that you and your nation can prosper under? No government, no king, no tyrant has ever unviolently relinquished its power. It is only through violence and the threat of violence that nations submit. Nations meaning their leaders, their rulers. Right? Well, how about you, states? Formally free yourselves, huh? Your decision in the states comes soon as well, does it not? Think and choose. Making no choice to act is still a choice and results in slavery. So only action in the face of evil will defeat it. The American colonies decided long ago that they wanted to be free of tyranny, murder, oppression, and servitude. They wanted their freedom, and they had to use violence to resolve the problem because the King of England would not listen to peaceable discussion, would not listen to reason, would not agree to give up his tyrannical and despotic techniques. Canada, You are law-abiding, nonviolent people. You're now being faced with a law-destroying, violent regime. What choice do you have? How much more abuse will you suffer? How low will you sink before you stand and resist? And the same question I ask of the free United States of America. Same question exists. The same question exists in Ukraine. How long in Ukraine before the people said enough of the tyranny, the corruption, the liars, and the thieves, and having foreign influence in their nation? You know, Hunter Biden, Burisma Energy. They started investigating him, and Biden stepped in and says, we won't give you money if you continue to investigate him. So they stopped investigating Hunter Biden and continued the corruption. How many years, right, before the people in Ukraine said no more? And they created and said, hey, we want to be separatists. We want our own nation. And just yesterday, Putin agreed and said, they've had a chance to fix their problems. We now recognize you, right, as separate republics. And the world is outraged. People can only live under tyranny for so long. It destroys not only the people, but economies, nations, and the spirit of a people, until that spirit rises once again, like a phoenix from the ashes. You burn a civilization, you burn a culture, you burn a people down, and it can rise again. Canada, what is your fate? How long will you burn? To what destruction will you fall, right? And I also ask the question of these United States here in America. Our time is coming, our choices are coming as well. Again, this is no call to violence, a call for insurrection. This is no call for arms. This is just a discussion, a satirical discussion. Why is it satire? Because I say it is. Because I say, look, you bunch of hypocrites, at what's going on around the world. And I'm not talking to you, the audience, when I say hypocrites. Right? The people of DC would claim to be righteous and lawful government when they act like anything but. When they allow lawlessness to run wild in the streets of America and then claim that they are morally superior, that they are sovereign, that they, right, are in charge, that we must obey them. All nations, including the United States, including the people of Ukraine, including Canada, are nations of cats, if you will, running 1,000 different directions at 100 different speeds, hard to control. Perhaps we weren't made to be controlled, but rather provided with a nation, a territory in which we can run as wild as we wish or stay as calm as we wish. Right? But if we're not being harassed, we're not being terrorized, then we can remain calm and productive. But it's when we're terrorized that we run about and are hard to control. Governments don't seem to understand that. The more they squeeze their fist around our neck, the more we're going to resist. Justin Trudeau, Parliament, Washington, D.C., take note of history. Klaus Schwab, take note of history. Folks, chance favors the prepared mind. Are you in possession of food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, and a means of self-defense? If not, I recommend getting prepared. Godspeed to you all. Thank you for all you do to support our efforts to bring satire and a little bit of perspective to an enraged and insane world. Godspeed, Semper Fi.